I was cleaning the attic when I found the box. It was hidden behind old bags and boxes of old things we never use. I had been cleaning up for hours, and I was getting tired. But something about this box made me curious. I moved the heavy boxes aside and pulled the small wooden box out from the back. It was dusty and old, but it didn't look like something we would throw away. I opened the box carefully. Inside, there were old letters, photos, and a few small things that seemed unimportant. At first, I thought they were just old memories, nothing special. But as I looked closer at the letters, I noticed something strange. These were love letters, and they weren't written to me. They were written to my husband, Tom. I froze for a moment. I didn't know what to think. I looked at the name on the letters, Emily. I had never heard of Emily before. Tom had never mentioned her. We had been married for 5 years, and in all that time, I had never heard him talk about her. My heart began to beat faster. I felt a strange feeling in my chest. What was this? Why had Tom kept these letters? I quickly put the letters back into the box. I closed the lid and sat there for a moment, staring at the box in my hands. My mind was racing. Maybe they were old letters. Maybe they were just memories from the past, things that didn't matter anymore. But deep down, I couldn't stop thinking about them. Why had Tom kept them? Why had he never told me about Emily? Was there something he wasn't telling me? I tried to push the thought out of my mind, but it wouldn't go away. I couldn't just forget about it. I knew I had to know more. I had to find out if there was something important I was missing. Maybe I was just overthinking things. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. I decided to wait until the evening when Tom would be home. I didn't want to ask him about it over the phone or send him a message. I wanted to look him in the eyes when I asked. I wanted to see if he would tell me the truth. But as the evening came closer, I felt nervous. My stomach was tight. I wasn't sure what I was going to say or how he would react. When Tom walked in through the door, I could feel my heart beating faster. He smiled at me, but I couldn't smile back. I didn't want to be angry, but I felt angry inside. I couldn't help it. I had to know the truth. Tom asked me how my day had been, and I told him it was fine, but my mind wasn't on him. It was on the letters. I couldn't stop thinking about them. I tried to talk about other things, but the words didn't come out right. My thoughts were everywhere. Finally, I couldn't wait any longer. I had to ask, Tom, who is Emily? I asked, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. Tom looked surprised, and I could see a small change in his face. He didn't answer right away, which made me feel even more nervous. He sat down beside me, and I waited for him to say something. He finally spoke, but his voice didn't sound as sure as it usually did. Emily was someone I knew a long time ago. Before we met, he said slowly. He looked at me, and I could see that he wasn't sure how to explain it. I felt a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't anger. It was something else, something harder to explain. Was it true? Or was he hiding something? I tried to act normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about the letters. Why had he kept them? Why didn't he tell me about Emily before? I kept asking myself these questions, but Tom didn't seem to understand. why I was so quiet. He kept talking, saying it was in the past and that it didn't matter now. He said he loved me, and that was all that mattered. But the more he said, the more I felt unsure. He had kept these letters hidden, and now he was telling me that it didn't matter. How could it not matter? How could he not understand why I felt upset? I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I just nodded. Tom seemed to relax, thinking everything was okay, but I wasn't relaxed. My mind was full of questions, and I couldn't stop thinking about them. As he continued talking about his work, I felt the gap between us grow wider. I couldn't listen to him the same way. It was as if something had changed, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Tom was asleep next to me, but I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emily and the letters. Had Tom really moved on from her? Was it true that she didn't matter anymore? Or had I just learned something that would change everything? The silence in the room felt heavy. My thoughts kept spinning around in circles. I tried to push them away, but they wouldn't leave. The more I thought about it, the more confused I felt. If he really loved me, why hadn't he told me about Emily before? Why had he kept the letters? What did they really mean? The more I thought, the more I felt like something wasn't right. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was just overreacting. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. I needed to know more, and I couldn't ignore the question any longer. Did Tom still love Emily? Or was I just someone he had married because it was easy? I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think straight. All I knew was that I had to find out the truth. I had to understand what Tom really felt, and I had to do it soon before I lost myself in the confusion. Tomorrow, I would look for more answers. The next morning, I woke up feeling tired and heavy. I had barely slept the night before, my mind racing with thoughts of the letters and what Tom had said. He told me that Emily was in the past, that it didn't matter anymore. But I couldn't forget about her. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had found in the attic. Those letters weren't just pieces of paper. They were a part of Tom's life, and now they were a part of mine, too. Tom was already up when I woke. He was making coffee in the kitchen, and he smiled at me when he saw I was awake. I tried to smile back, but it felt hard. I didn't want to show him how upset I was. I didn't want him to see how confused I felt. I just wanted to be normal, but it didn't feel normal anymore. As we sat at the table eating breakfast, I couldn't stop thinking about the letters. Every time I looked at Tom, I wondered if he was still thinking about Emily. Was she in his heart? Was she still there, hidden behind the smile he gave me? I wanted to ask him more questions, but I didn't know how to start. What could I say? How could I tell him I didn't trust him? The more I thought, the more I realized that I needed to know more. I couldn't live with this question in my mind. I couldn't pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. I needed to understand the truth, even if it hurt. After breakfast, Tom left for work. I watched him go, and when the door closed behind him, I felt a strange feeling in my chest. It was a mix of fear and anger, but mostly it was confusion. I wanted to trust him, but I couldn't. Not yet. I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. I waited for a few hours, sitting in the living room and thinking. My mind kept going back to the box in the attic. The letters. Emily. I couldn't get rid of them. I kept asking myself, why didn't he tell me about her? If it was really in the past, why hadn't he been honest with me? Finally, I decided to go back to the attic. I had to see those letters again. Maybe they would give me more answers. Maybe I was missing something. I couldn't let it go. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I went up to the attic and found the box in the same place where I had left it. I sat down on the floor and opened it again. The letters were still there, looking as old and dusty as before. I picked one up carefully, feeling the weight of it in my hands. I had already read some of them, but I needed to read them again. I needed to understand them better. I needed to know what was so special about these letters that Tom had kept them all these years. I read the first letter slowly, trying to understand every word. It was a love letter. Emily had written about how much she loved Tom and how happy they were together. She talked about the future, about dreams they shared. As I read, I felt a pain in my chest. It was as if I was reading about a different person, someone who wasn't me, someone who had been in Tom's life before me. I put the first letter down and picked up another one. This one was different. It was a letter where Emily talked about how difficult it was to let go of Tom. She said that even though they were apart, she would always love him. She said that she hoped he would find happiness, but that she would never forget him. As I read these words, I felt like I was being hit by a wave of emotions. Was Tom still in love with her? Was he hiding these feelings from me? I couldn't stop myself from reading more. I needed to know everything. The letters were like a puzzle, and I had to put all the pieces together. Each letter felt like it was pulling me deeper into something I didn't want to understand. The more I read, the more questions I had. Why had Tom never told me about these letters? Why hadn't he told me about Emily? Did he still think about her? Did he still love her? As I sat there in the attic, surrounded by letters from the past, I realized I couldn't wait anymore. I needed to talk to Tom again. I needed answers. I couldn't just sit here and wonder. But this time, I wasn't going to ask him gently like I did yesterday. I couldn't do that anymore. I needed to be direct. I needed him to tell me the truth. When Tom came home that evening, I was already waiting for him. I didn't want to make dinner. I didn't want to pretend everything was okay. I just needed to know what was really going on. I didn't want to feel this pain anymore. I couldn't keep living with these questions in my mind. When Tom walked in, I didn't greet him with a smile. I didn't ask him how his day was. I just looked at him and he looked at me. There was a moment of silence between us. My heart was beating fast, and I could feel the anger rising in me. I couldn't keep it inside any longer. I need to know more about Emily, I said, my voice shaking a little. Tom looked surprised, and his face became serious. He didn't answer right away, and that made me feel even more unsure. I could see he was trying to find the right words. I didn't want to hear any excuses. I just wanted the truth. He sat down next to me and took a deep breath. Sarah, I told you, Emily is part of my past. It's over. She's not important anymore. His voice was calm, but there was something in his eyes that I couldn't understand. It was as if he was trying to convince himself, not just me. I shook my head. I don't believe you, Tom. Why did you keep her letters? Why did you keep all these things? Tom didn't answer. He just looked at me, and I could see the pain in his eyes. But the more I looked at him, the more I realized that he wasn't telling me everything. There was something he wasn't saying, and I needed to know what it was. The silence between us grew. I felt the walls between us growing taller. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know if I could trust him anymore. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. I needed to find the truth, no matter what it cost. The next few days felt strange. I couldn't stop thinking about Emily and the letters. Every time I looked at Tom, I wondered if he was still hiding something. I wanted to trust him, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt something wasn't right. I didn't know if he was lying or just trying to protect me. Either way, I couldn't ignore it. I needed to know more. I had to understand the truth. After Tom went to work, I found myself sitting in the living room again, lost in thought. I didn't know what to do next. I had already asked him about Emily, and he said it was all in the past. But I wasn't sure. My mind kept going back to the attic and the letters. There had to be more I could find out. There had to be something I was missing. I couldn't just wait. I had to find answers. I decided to look through Tom's things again. This time, I wasn't just looking for the letters. I was looking for anything that could tell me more about his past with Emily. I knew I was invading his privacy, but I didn't care. I needed to know the truth. I started with his office. It was a small room with a desk, some bookshelves, and a few pictures. It didn't look like there was much there, but I knew Tom kept some old things in his desk drawer. I opened the drawer carefully and began looking through the papers. Most of them were bills or work papers, nothing important. But then I found something. It was an old photo, yellowed with age. It was a picture of Tom and Emily. They were standing together, smiling, looking happy. It was clear that they had been close. I felt a knot in my stomach as I looked at it. This was proof that they had shared something important, something that I didn't know about. I put the photo back in the drawer quickly, but I couldn't forget about it. I kept thinking about the way they looked at each other. It was a different kind of love, a love I didn't share with Tom. I had always thought that our love was special, that it was enough to keep us happy. But now, I wasn't so sure. I wondered if Tom had ever truly moved on from Emily. If he had never really let her go, how could he fully love me? I couldn't stop myself from searching more. I went through his things again, this time looking in the closet. I opened his suitcases and checked under the bed. I was desperate for any clue, any small sign that could tell me what was going on in his heart. But all I found were more things I didn't understand. Old clothes, books, papers, nothing about Emily. It felt like I was looking for something that didn't exist, but I couldn't stop. The hours passed, and I still didn't have the answers I needed. I felt more lost than ever. It seemed like everything was pointing to the same thing. Tom still cared about Emily. He might have said that it was over, but I wasn't so sure. Maybe he was trying to convince me, but deep down, he wasn't ready to let her go. By the time Tom came home that evening, I was exhausted. I hadn't found anything new, but I couldn't stop thinking about everything. I wanted to ask him more questions, but I wasn't sure what to ask. I didn't know how to get the truth out of him without making things worse. I knew he loved me, but I also knew that something wasn't right. I needed to know what he was hiding. Tom could tell something was wrong. He asked me if I was okay, but I didn't answer right away. I just nodded. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to hear anything that might make me feel worse. I wanted to figure things out on my own. After dinner, we sat in the living room, and the silence between us felt heavy. Tom was watching TV, but I wasn't paying attention. My mind was still spinning with thoughts of Emily. I couldn't let go of the image of her and Tom in that photo. It was like a ghost, always following me, always reminding me that I wasn't the only woman in his life. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth, no matter what it cost. I stood up suddenly, and Tom looked at me, surprised. I'm going to find out what's really going on, I said. My voice was calm, but inside I was shaking. Tom didn't answer. He just stared at me. I couldn't read the expression on his face. Was he angry? Was he scared? I didn't know, but I wasn't going to stop. I had already been quiet for too long. I had already held back my questions for too long. I couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. I went upstairs to our bedroom and pulled open the drawer where we kept extra things. I started to look through it, searching for anything that might give me more answers. My hands were shaking as I moved things around. There were old receipts, some papers, and a few books. Then, under a pile of old magazines, I found something that caught my eye. It was a letter. It wasn't like the ones I had found in the attic. It was newer, written in Tom's handwriting. I opened the letter carefully. My heart was pounding in my chest as I read it. It was a letter to Emily. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was a letter from Tom saying that he missed her and that he was still thinking about her. It wasn't just a letter from the past. It was a letter from recently, maybe just a few months ago. It was a letter that told me everything I needed to know. Tom still thought about Emily. He still missed her. My hands were shaking as I put the letter back in the drawer. I couldn't believe it. I had found the answer, but it wasn't the one I wanted. I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't talk to Tom right now. I needed time to think. I needed to figure out what this meant for our marriage and for me. I sat down on the bed, feeling lost. I loved Tom, but I wasn't sure if I could trust him anymore. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I couldn't go back to the way things were. Something had changed. I wasn't sure if I could ever look at Tom the same way again. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for the truth. The letter sat in the drawer, but it felt like it was in my hands, burning into my skin. I couldn't stop thinking about the words Tom had written to Emily. He had told her that he missed her. He had said that he was still thinking about her. How could he do that? How could he write such a letter and then act like everything was fine between us? I had always believed that Tom loved me, but now I wasn't so sure. The truth was starting to feel heavy in my chest, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. The next morning, I woke up early. The silence in the house felt louder than usual. Tom was still sleeping next to me, but I couldn't find any peace. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing with the things I had learned. The letter had told me everything I needed to know. Tom still loved Emily. He had never stopped thinking about her. And now I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't just pretend that nothing was wrong. I got out of bed quietly, trying not to wake him. I needed to think. I needed some space to figure out what to do. The house felt so small, and my thoughts felt even bigger. I didn't know if I could stay in this marriage if Tom was still holding on to his past. I didn't know if I could love him the same way after everything I had learned. I walked around the house, looking at things like I had never seen them before. I looked at the pictures on the walls, the places where we had been happy, but now they all felt like lies. How could I ever look at those pictures again without wondering if Tom was really happy with me or if he was thinking about Emily the whole time? The more I thought, the more confused I became. I loved Tom, but how could I stay with him when he was still in love with someone else? Was it possible for him to love both of us? I didn't want to share my husband with anyone, least of all someone from his past. I felt like I was living in a world that wasn't real, like everything was a lie. I couldn't stay in the house anymore. I needed to get away and clear my head. I grabbed my purse and left the house without saying anything to Tom. I needed to be alone. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there with him. The house felt suffocating, and I needed some space to breathe. I walked for hours through the park, along the streets, anywhere to escape the thoughts that were taking over my mind. I thought about calling my best friend, Rachel, but I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't want to sound crazy. I didn't want her to think I was overreacting. I wasn't sure if I was overreacting, but I didn't know what else to feel. By the time the sun was setting, I found myself sitting on a bench by the lake, staring out at the water. I felt empty. I felt lost. The world around me seemed to be moving forward, but I was stuck. My thoughts kept going back to Tom and Emily. I couldn't escape them. They were in my mind all the time, like shadows that wouldn't go away. I knew I couldn't avoid the truth forever. I had to face it, even if it hurt. Tom had written that letter, and that meant he still had feelings for Emily. He hadn't told me about her. He had kept her hidden in the past, and now I felt like I was the one who had been hidden. I was the one who was left in the dark. After sitting for a long time, I stood up and walked back home. I didn't know what to say to Tom, but I knew I couldn't keep running away. I had to face him. I had to tell him what I had learned, even if it was hard. But as I walked home, I also knew that there was no easy way to fix this. No matter what Tom said, things would never be the same. When I got home, Tom was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. He looked at me with concern, but I could see that he was also worried. He knew something was wrong. He had to know that I had found the letter. I stood in the doorway, looking at him. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know what to say, but I had to say something. I had to get the truth out, even if it meant losing everything. Tom, I said quietly, I found the letter. His face went pale. He didn't say anything, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew what I was talking about. He knew that I had seen the letter he had written to Emily. I didn't want you to find that, he said finally, his voice low. I never meant for you to see it. I shook my head. Why didn't you tell me about her, Tom? Why didn't you tell me that you still loved her?" Tom stood up, looking like he didn't know how to explain. He ran his hands through his hair, and I could see how torn he was. But I didn't care about his feelings right now. I didn't care about his reasons. All I cared about was the truth. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. "I thought I could forget about Emily. I thought I could move on, but I never really did. She was always in my heart, even when I was with you." His words felt like a punch to my chest. He had been hiding this from me all this time. He had been living a lie, and I had been living in that lie. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to feel. "You never told me the truth," I said, my voice shaking. "You never told me that she still meant something to you." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could make it work with you. I thought I could love you and forget about her. But I couldn't. I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think straight. Everything was falling apart. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to fix this. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't live with this lie anymore. "I need time to think," I said, my voice quiet. I didn't want to hear his apologies. I didn't want to hear anything he had to say right now. I just needed space. Tom nodded, looking like he was about to say something else, but I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I needed to be alone. I needed to think about what I wanted, what was best for me. And I needed to figure out if I could ever forgive him for what he had done. The silence in the house felt even louder now. The next few days felt like they stretched on forever. I stayed in the house, but it didn't feel like home anymore. The silence was heavy, and every corner of the house reminded me of Tom and Emily. I couldn't escape the feeling that something was broken between us. I tried to focus on other things, work, cleaning, even watching TV, but nothing could make the pain go away. My mind was always returning to that letter, to the truth that Tom still loved Emily. I stayed away from Tom as much as I could. I didn't want to look at him. I didn't want to hear his voice. I needed time, time to think, time to figure out what to do. I couldn't just go back to things being the same. It didn't feel right anymore. The house felt lonely without him. I spent my evenings sitting in the living room, reading or staring out of the window. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I couldn't stop thinking about how I had found the letter. The truth was out, and it had changed everything. I didn't know what to do next. Could I forgive him? Could I trust him again? Or had everything between us been a lie? The questions kept spinning in my head, but I didn't have any answers. One evening, after another long day of silence, I decided to go for a walk. I needed to clear my head. As I walked through the streets, I felt the weight of everything on my shoulders. It was as if the world was moving on and I was stuck. I wanted to talk to someone, but I didn't know who. I didn't want to tell my friends about Tom. I didn't want them to think I was weak or that I couldn't handle it. But the truth was, I felt weak. I felt like I was losing control of everything. I stopped at a small park near our house and sat on a bench. The cool air felt good against my skin, but it didn't calm my mind. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to think clearly, trying to push away the emotions. But I couldn't. Everything I felt, hurt, confusion, anger kept coming back. I was lost. I didn't know if I should leave Tom or try to fix our marriage. I didn't know if I could live with the truth that he still loved someone else. Could we move forward from this? Could I ever trust him again? I thought about the good times we had shared, the happy memories of our early years together. I thought about how much I had loved him, how much I still loved him. But the memories didn't change the reality. The truth was clear. He had lied to me. He had kept his feelings for Emily a secret, and now I was left wondering if I had ever really known him. I knew I couldn't live like this forever. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. But I also knew I couldn't make any decisions while I was so upset. I needed time. I needed to make a choice. When I got back home, Tom was there, waiting. He looked at me like he was unsure of what to do or say. I could see that he wanted to talk, but I didn't know if I was ready for that. "I think we need to talk," he said softly. I nodded, but I didn't know what to say. I didn't know where to start. My mind was still full of questions and pain. I felt like I had no answers, and I wasn't sure if I ever would. Tom sat down next to me, and for a long moment, we didn't speak. The room was quiet except for the soft sounds of the house. It felt strange being this close to him, yet so far apart. "I've been thinking a lot," Tom said, breaking the silence. "And I know I hurt you. I should have been honest with you from the start. I should have told you about Emily. I never meant to keep secrets from you." I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. His words didn't change what I had already learned. They didn't change the fact that he still had feelings for her. "I don't know what to do," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can live with the truth." Tom reached out to take my hand, but I pulled away. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to forgive him. I wasn't ready to forget what had happened. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said. "I love you. I always have. But Emily, she was part of my past. And I thought I could move on. I thought I could love you without thinking about her. But I was wrong. I should have told you everything." I looked at him, searching his face for any sign of truth. But all I saw was regret, and that didn't feel like enough. It didn't change the fact that he had kept secrets from me. It didn't change the fact that I felt like I was living in a lie. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't know if I can keep living with you if you still love her. I don't know if I can trust you anymore." Tom looked at me with sad eyes. I could see that he was hurt by my words, but I also knew that I had to say them. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. I couldn't keep pretending that I wasn't hurt. "I understand," he said softly. "I know I don't deserve your trust. I don't deserve your love. But I'll do anything to make it right. I'll do anything to show you that I love you." His words were sincere, but they didn't change how I felt. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that we could move on from this. But right now, everything felt broken. I couldn't just ignore the truth. "I don't know if I can believe you anymore," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can forgive you for keeping this from me." Tom didn't say anything more. He just looked at me, his face filled with regret. I could see that he was sorry, but it didn't change the reality. The truth had come out, And now everything was different. I knew that I couldn't make any decisions in that moment. I needed more time to think. I needed to figure out what I wanted. I needed to understand if I could ever trust Tom again, if I could ever love him the way I used to. The silence between us was thick with pain. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that nothing would ever be the same. Whatever happened, everything had changed, and I wasn't sure if we could go back. I stood up and walked to the door. I need some time, I said softly. I need space to think. Tom didn't try to stop me. He just nodded, his face sad. I walked out of the room, leaving him behind. I didn't know if I could ever go back, but I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't live in the middle of this anymore. It was time to face the truth. It was time to decide what was best for me. The days after I told Tom I needed space were the hardest. It felt like I was living in a fog, unsure of what I was doing or what would happen next. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about Emily, and about what had gone wrong. Every day felt longer than the last, and the silence between us grew heavier. I didn't know how much longer I could keep living like this. I spent most of my time alone, trying to find some peace. I walked through the park near our house every day, hoping that the fresh air would clear my mind. But no matter how far I walked, the thoughts always followed. They were always there, swirling around my head. I couldn't escape them. I couldn't escape the truth. I needed to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in uncertainty, trapped between my love for Tom and the pain of what I had learned. I needed to choose. Could I stay with him, knowing that he still had feelings for his ex? Or should I leave and start over? One evening, after another quiet day, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I had to talk to Tom. I had to face him, face the truth, and face my own feelings. The thought of losing him made my heart ache, but the thought of living in doubt and pain made me feel even worse. I found Tom sitting in the living room, looking lost in his own thoughts. He didn't seem surprised when I walked in. He had probably been waiting for me to make up my mind. I've been thinking, I said, my voice soft but firm, and I've made a decision. Tom looked at me, his eyes full of hope and fear at the same time. He had been waiting for me to say something, but I wasn't sure if he was ready for the truth or if I was. I've been hurt, I continued, feeling the weight of my words. I've been hurt because you kept things from me. You kept your feelings for Emily a secret, and that's something I can't just forget. But I also know that I love you. I don't want to lose you. Tom nodded, his eyes full of regret. I could see that he understood what I was saying. He knew that I was not going to pretend that everything was fine anymore. He had hurt me, but he also knew that I still cared for him. I know I made a mistake, he said quietly. I should have told you the truth. I should have been honest from the beginning, but I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted to make you feel like you weren't enough. I know you didn't want to hurt me, I said, feeling the tears start to well up in my eyes. But you did, and I've been trying to figure out if I can forgive you for that, if I can still trust you. The room was silent for a moment, and I could feel the weight of the decision pressing on me. I didn't want to hurt Tom, but I couldn't keep pretending that things were okay when they weren't. I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. I don't know if I can forgive you right away, I said softly, but I also don't want to walk away from everything we've built together. I still love you, Tom. And maybe we can try to move forward, but we have to be honest with each other. We have to trust each other completely. Tom stood up slowly and walked towards me. He took my hands in his, and I could feel his warmth. I could see the love in his eyes, and for a moment, it made me believe that maybe we could fix things. Maybe we could start fresh. But I also knew that things would never be the same. The past would always be there, and we would have to deal with it together. I will do anything to make it right, he said. I will be honest with you from now on. I will never hide anything from you again. I took a deep breath and nodded. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was willing to try. We both had mistakes to learn from, but I knew that if we could be open and honest with each other, we could move forward. It wasn't a perfect solution. I still had doubts. I still had fears, but I also had hope. Hope that we could rebuild what we had and maybe even make it stronger. Love wasn't perfect. It wasn't always easy, but I knew that with time, we could learn to trust each other again. The next few weeks were difficult, but they were also filled with small moments of healing. Tom and I talked more than we had in a long time. We were open with each other about our feelings, our fears, and our mistakes. There were times when I was angry, times when I wanted to walk away, but there were also times when I saw the love in Tom's eyes and felt a spark of hope. We took it one day at a time. We didn't rush things. We didn't pretend that everything was okay overnight. But little by little, things started to get better. Tom showed me that he was serious about changing, about being honest with me. He stopped hiding things, stopped keeping secrets. And I tried to let go of my fears and learn to trust him again. It wasn't easy, but nothing worth having ever is. A few months later, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, looking at my reflection. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew one thing. I had made the right choice. I had chosen to face the truth, to face my fears, and to try again with Tom. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it was real. And sometimes that's all we need. As I looked at myself, I smiled. The journey wasn't over, but I was ready to move forward. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew that I was strong enough to face it. I had learned that no matter how hard life gets, we always have the choice to rebuild, to start again, and to believe in love, even when it feels broken. I didn't have all the answers, but I had hope. And for now, that was enough.